start with, you know, a lot of great information there, and I think James ended with team. You know, this is a team effort, and so starting out with seeing what all the state and counties can bring to bear, we now are going to kind of mine down to the community, as where James said, the disasters or events start and end. So build our team and the resources for that team. So we're going to get into what are the tasks and areas of expertise and resources that you're going to need. In following our ICS structure, we're going to start with leadership and then talk about administrative needs to get the planning process started here. And we're going to begin with a poll, Leslie.
All right, there you go. All right, so you should all see something pop up on your screen. Take a few seconds to answer. I am familiar with the following professional tree care certifications and credentials. This is just a way for Andy to kind of get everybody's background and knowledge on certain credentials that exist out there, just to see who we have and what the familiarity is. So just give everybody a few more seconds to put in their responses. So we've got most folks responding already, which is great. And all right. So it looks like what we've got is most everybody on the call, 92% of the folks have heard of ISA certified arborist. They've also 72% tree risk assessment qualification they're also familiar with. And 56% of the people or folks are familiar with the municipal specialist certification through ISA. And just a couple of folks on the call are not familiar with any of the certifications.
Boy, that's great. Expertise is important. We're going to be touching on that. So I want to get a perspective from everybody on how well those types of credentials are known out there. And you as a group can see that too. So next question.
All right. So next is trying to find out if your community has an urban forestry professional on staff that works for your town, or if your town uses a consultant to do some of your tree work. So it's yes, no, I'm not sure. It's just kind of get a sense of who we've got and how your community manages their trees in their urban forest. I'll give everybody just a few more seconds to get their response in so we can see who we've got on the call. All right. Looks like I've got most folks in here. That looks like 74% of the folks say that their community does have either an urban forestry professional on staff or they use a consultant for managing their trees. 13% say they don't have either one, and then 13% say I am not sure. So about 25% of the folks don't currently have an urban forestry professional or not sure.
Well, as a group, I'd say people are pretty well educated and reaching out for those qualified services. A lot of what we're going to be going over is knowing how to select that kind of service. So helpful to see that, and everybody can see. We have one more, Leslie?
Yes. Yep. So that's open now. Just take a few seconds to respond. Asking if your community uses professional tree companies for tree maintenance and emergency response. So this is looking to see if you use outside services or you have tree crews on staff that you use, or you don't use outside services, but you do have staff. They may not be certified or have a lot of background in tree care. Yes, you use professional tree companies that have certified arborists on staff, or yes, you use outside services, but you're not sure if they have certified arborists on staff. So just take a few seconds and so we can see what the breakdown is of how you manage tree maintenance and emergency response in your community. And again, if you're not sure, you can kind of take your best guess or abstain. That's your choice. So, all right. So it looks like we've got most everybody with their response in. So I will go ahead and close it and share the responses. So it looks like it's almost a dead heat between communities that have, they don't use outside services because they have trained tree crews on staff that they use for their maintenance, with 37%. And then the 33% of the communities or folks on here they use outside services that they know have certified arborists on staff. 15% say that they don't use outside services, but they have staff that takes care of their trees, but they're not necessarily trained. And then another 15% says they do use outside services and they're not sure if they have, or they don't know if they have certified arborists on staff.
Okay, great. So we're going to talk about how you select that, and you know, as James mentioned, there are resources out there available, you know, pushing up to county and so forth. So let's kind of get into that process. So thanks for everybody. That's great information. So leadership here, we're going to kind of start with building our urban forestry team. And you can see again, here's the instant command structure with the team leader, public information, liaison, operations, planning and logistics, and administrative support. So what are the issues in terms of challenges in managing a storm damage, tree damaging event? Let's look at each of these areas and what the tasks need to be done. Well, as Jim mentioned, a team leader, you know, somebody in leadership and decision making, we need to have somebody in charge. Who in your community can that be? Well, it should be a community staff person. The individual should be a manager or supervisor probably, or trained in ICS. A logical choice for your community is manager overseeing your tree care operations. Other choices may include public works, parks and recreation, or planning staff. So ultimately we need to assign that team leader. Moving on to public information and a liaison, what are the tasks? Well, getting information out to the public about your response efforts, planning, coordinating the team activities with other agencies and departments. Who should we have in this role? Certainly, I think a community staff person is the best person. And if you have a public information officer in your community, you would use them. This is also a training role that can be gone through ICS called the Public Information Officer. You know, and I know clerks kind of know everything in smaller communities, so maybe that would be that person. But recognize, you know, not all events are going to need this level. This could be a role that the team leader is going to be assuming in the smaller events. So let's look at operations, what tasks need to be done. We've got tree work, right? We're going to need to doing inspections on these calls in about tree damage to assess them and prioritize that work. We also will be doing a storm damage tree inventory, all of which we're going to be discussing more. And then we need somebody supervising these activities. Who can provide this role? Well, community staff person, professional tree care crews for the tree work, obviously. Inspections can be done by a staff person, would be our supervisor. And then we may need our arboriculture and urban forestry expertise to do tree assessment and tree inventory work. Okay, planning and logistics. What do we have to do here? We need to supervise and direct inspections and storm damage assessments. This unit or individual or team, as a team, you're going to be developing and monitoring event action plans, assessing resource needs and getting those as needed. Who can provide this? Well, community staff, certainly, you know, tree care or planning. In a large event, you may need some urban forestry expertise. Finally, on the administrative side, what things need to be done? Well, somebody's going to be taking calls from the public regarding damage, documentation, general administrative support functions, and possibly doing dispatch. So who might be good choices? Well, certainly community administrative staff are the best qualified to provide administrative support. They're familiar with operational and administrative financial processes in the community. Okay. So, in our poll there, we said, do you use qualified expertise, both in tree care or urban forestry expertise? So we have pretty broad knowledge, it seems, but I want to break down, how you measure tree care and urban forestry expertise. Certainly we look to years of experience, maybe higher education, but our industry has certifications and organizations like all disciplines do. And urban forestry is really a blend of two disciplines, arboriculture, which is the care of trees or woody plants, and forestry. And certifications and credentials go to individuals. And then, the broader organizations like the tree care industry are groups of individuals. So what you're going to see are these individual certifications given to individual people. The biggest being the International Society of Arboriculture. We mentioned tree certified arborists and some of the other qualifications. Another group of registered consulting arborists is in the American Society of Consulting Arborists. So you're going to see arboriculture expertise and urban forestry expertise among these groups of individuals. The foresters, experience in or concentration is more in traditional forestry, although some of those folks do work in urban forestry. And there's the Society of American Foresters, and those you also may be familiar with the NC registered foresters. And so that in terms of tree services, you're going to find many individuals within a tree service may have qualifications or certifications on the other side, but the Tree Care Industry Association is the major organization that sets standards for qualification for tree care companies. So when it comes to a qualified tree service, what do you need to look for? Well, check credentials. At a minimum, a tree care crew should have ISA certified staff, credentialed staff on board, properly insured, and equipment. So quickly as we go, trees are good here is where you find certified arborists and their certifications. Let's go quickly so I can give you some examples, and we can just do North Carolina. It's taking its time, searching. All right. So as you can see, the individuals, there I am, not for hire. But on the right-hand side, you're going to see if they work for a company in the center here, where they're located, and what their certifications and qualifications are. So check out those. TCIA, jumping there, Tree Care Industry, same thing. You can have learn a lot about this organization. Find a qualified tree care. Their registered accredited companies are really the gold standard. They have minimums for numbers of certified arborists on staff, safety program requirements, properly insured. So they are the gold standard. There are not as many of them, but if you can choose one of those, or choose at least a member of these groups. So gold standard is accredited. So through mutual aid agreements, as James mentioned, there are county contracts, and I know folks use those. There are also these national disaster management companies that do provide tree care. I do particularly in the latter, make sure you look and see if it's qualified staff that's doing that work. So let's look at qualified consultants. On the arboriculture tree care side, they should be certified arborists, or they could be board master certified arborists. And tree risk assessment qualification is what we would be looking for here. The American Society of Consulting Arborists, again, you can find expertise there on their website too. On the urban forestry side, I would look to add at least a municipal specialist to that qualification, or higher education and experience in urban forestry. A simple web search you're going to find in terms of consulting companies out there. There's Davie Resource Group. Bartlett is another choice. I'm not seeing them pop up right now. Planet Geo. Bartlett provides also services there, Bartlett. So, but again, you're going to be kind of seeing, in terms of who is doing that work, these are things that you would like to look for in terms of qualifications. And then finally, us, the North Carolina Forest Service, we have a lot to offer. Local, as James mentioned, our county rangers are there to provide local assistance. We have certified arborists among those. They can provide tree assessments, other services. Here, we're doing a little Arbor Day ceremony. Then there's our urban community forestry staff, including me and Jennifer, and we provide guidance, consulting, resources, and information. And we do have a fun grant program. And then finally, the urban forest strike teams are trained teams to come in and do storm damage inventory. Certified arborists, tree risk assessment qualified, and all that work is done according to FEMA guidelines. But when it comes to talking about the storm damage inventories, which we're going to go into, this is a resource available for you. Okay, so we've kind of got our team and resources together, or you have a good understanding of what to look for. What are kind of the administrative things? Let's talk a bit about service contracts, documentation, and communication plan and an advisory committee. So the best contract is what we would call a term tree work contract. Here, you would have a contract that runs in 1 to 3 years. Within it, you're going to have a set of specifications for tree and stump removal, for example, and various pruning specifications. They're going to follow, if you're done right, ANSI A300 standards and ISA best management practices. I'm going to point down here to the lower right. We have templates available for you to look at, which have specifications written out. Then, you're going to really have 2 items of work, the regularly scheduled work, and we suggest a unit price contract structure like you see here in this table. You would ask for, you would put in your estimated number of units, and then we're going to get a unit price for each diameter class. That you give them the work, there's your pay item per unit. You would in that contract have a specified time that the work must be completed. And then also an emergency tree work item, simply requesting, say, an aerial lift, chipper, and 2 qualified arborists. I would add a boom loader and an operator and an hourly rate, how many units they may have be available to supply, specify minimum response times, and in the end you should pay a minimum number of hours for response. And then finally, you're going to ask for qualifications. An alternative too is if you know what work needs to be done, specifically removal or pruning, you can use a lump sum bid. And we'd be specifying we need X number of trees, and it could be bid out by a management section. There's Raleigh's leaf collection routes. Again, you would have those specifications that we just talked about, and bid that work out by management. We know that we know what needs to be done, and in this case, we're going to have a known number of units. I'd suggest putting in a unit price table, because then it allows you to add change and make changes as you go. Add a tree, take one off, etc. And then finally qualifications. So moving on to urban and forestry services and consulting. First, we're going to talk about kind of large services, doing tree inventories, any number of these types of inventories. Canopy cover assessments are going to be another type of work that you might ask for, or management plans. Your specifications on an inventory, you're going to be specifying what data is to be collected. In case of trees, that's information about the location, and then management information, and then usually requesting a report. Canopy cover assessments and management plans, you're really asking for an analysis to be completed, so you're specifying what that would be and report, and then certainly you would want to be asking for qualifications. Typical fee schedules on inventory can be lump sum. They could be unit price. Complete tree inventories are often billed on a per tree pricing. And then report costs can be separated out. Canopy cover assessments and management plans are usually bid on our lump sum types of fee structures. And I'm pretty excited to announce today that we have a new state contract that is being awarded as we speak. The award's been made. That is a unit price structure to complete sample tree inventories on a per street mile basis. Canopy cover assessments, three different levels, and that billed on a per square mile basis. So we could take any community and based on your miles, come up with a fee that it would take to do that. And we will use this for our work in terms of grant work. But if a community wants to, say, go it alone, they have the funding to do it, they could certainly buy off of this state contract. So pretty excited to bring that tool to you. So on a term consulting contract, we have service specifications. You know, we're talking, this was a typical one that I used as a consultant. You may be asking for individual tree assessments. This could be a per unit fee base, per assessment fee. Those are specified according, again, to those similar standards on a level of assessment. Then you could ask for general management consulting, planning, meeting, site development plan review, etc. And then finally, if you need one for emergency services, have an hourly rate for responding to that service. Okay, so a bit about how you might structure contracts for services. Now let's take a look at documentation. You know, if the storm hits, lots of calls, work, many priorities, right? Let's get organized. There is software available to assist with this, but you know, paper documents can work just fine. If the event elevates to a federal disaster, you're going to need to have documentation to back up the work. And here are kind of the current guidelines if tree damage happens, where they're going to fund that. So create a system that's going to really document the work from the time you receive a call to inspection to dispatching and finally completing that work. And we have a number of tools to help you with that, starting with it, you know, here comes the call. Numbers get called, or excuse me, numbered in order. And that number is going to carry out through your whole documentation. We have a little coding system here to say, person calls in, tree is down, it's on the wires and on the street. List those out as they come in. Here, a checkbox to the call receiver would hand this off to the planning unit, which would be over here, transferred to a form that's going to be a dispatch and inspection log. So inspectors can use this form in the field too. But essentially, yeah, log that call number, the problem. If an inspector looks at it, who it is and what a priority they came back with, they could, if have the time, put that a FEMA coding system. Ultimately, that would get dispatched to a crew, who that crew is. They complete the work. Might we leave a spot there to get back and say whether cleanup needs to be done and other types of comments. And then finally, a crew doing the work in the field. So again, they get a call from the planning unit saying call number such and such address, what the problem was. They do the work, perhaps ideally collect a little information about the tree they did the work on and where it's located, whether they finished up the cleanup. I put that there because in major events, our crews would be working on eliminating hazards and maybe leaving cleanup for later. The last thing you may is have a crew dispatch log documenting crew staff, equipment, designated work. And if you're using contract crews, signing them in and out. So kind of the last step there. So documentation. Now let's touch a bit about public information. And the take home here is have a communications plan. To manage the storm event, let folks know what we're doing out there. And here is kind of the 6 steps on a communications plan. I'm not a specialist, but here are the questions you ask and go through, and then ultimately, what tools and format you have to distribute. Many communities have all these venues to put information out. And a general large public communication, you are trying to send to a broad audience. It might be for typical preparation or public safety messages, press releases, and standard statements can be written pre-storm, and use these for notification of mitigation work pre-storm or post-storm, or even during that event. You're trying to reach a large audience, and this is the type of media you'd be using. You're targeting to a specific audience, maybe neighbors in a particular area on regular scheduled work. You obviously could do mailers or door hangers and so on. But there, social media and other tools, neighborhood social media, next door apps, or other ways to get information in targeted areas. So again, give some thought to this and decide how you will disseminate information in an event. Finally, community involvement. If you don't have one, develop a tree advisory board. Get the community involved. They can be advocates for your work and help you through the process. And it comes to managing a storm event. They can also be assisting with communications in your emergency response. And they can certainly, if they're involved in this process, can say, this has been well thought out, and be patient and act as liaisons for you. So a great tool to have, and we should be involved. Okay, so that wraps up kind of our leadership and administrative resources. Next, we're going to move on to planning, which is readiness, is preparedness and mitigation, and we're going to start with mitigation. Oops, excuse me. And with that, Leslie, I'm ready to hand off to Jennifer, who's going to talk about mitigation efforts, minimizing the impacts of storm events. Unless we do we have time for questions? How are we doing?
Yep, we're fine on questions, and we actually have a short break for people to stretch their legs for a few minutes.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, if we do have about 5 minutes before the break, if you guys want to ask Andy some questions, get clarification on any of the readiness processes and what your community needs to be doing or could be doing. It's a lot of information to digest in a really quick time. So he's a resource there for you. There's also that checklist that he referenced in the handouts, is something that they developed to help walk communities through developing a readiness response and recovery plan for your community. So I do have a few minutes. If you have any questions, just type them in that question panel box, and I will bring it to Andy's attention, and I'll give him a few moments to respond. At any point during the presentations for the remainder of the day, just go ahead and type your question as they're talking, and I'll make sure we get to them at the end there. So I'm not seeing any questions come in. So let's see. Okay. No questions coming in. So what we'll do is we have time for a little bit of a break here, just a chance